Welcome to the Abundant Accountant Podcast. This is where accounting professionals just like you come to learn all the most efficient ways to grow their firms, sharpen their skills, and have consistent increasing sales. We cover topics from how to not be salesy, pushy, annoying, a nag, harassing to your prospects and clients, finding your ideal client, increasing sales, and really putting up boundaries so you only work with clients who you truly want to work with, and stop donating your time away for free and start actually getting paid for the worth that you deliver to your clients. You'll learn sales strategies, sales tips, as well as hear from other successful accounting professionals in the industry. This podcast will show you step by step the path so you can create a firm and a life of your dreams full of abundance. Today, we have a very special guest on the Abundant Accountant Podcast. Our special guest is an author, speaker, trainer, master hypnotist, and a master of neuro-linguistic programming. For the past 30 years, he's actually taught tens and thousands of people the power of language to persuade, influence, and sell, heal, and turn stumbling blocks into stepping stones. And I'll also give you information on his book too. But before we dive into today's episode, I truly want to end the grind where you feel constantly frustrated and stressed, having no control over who you're working with, or even knowing how much you can truly charge for your services. So I've got a question for you. Imagine if you had the confidence to ask for higher fees. Imagine if you had a strategy to raise those rates for existing clients without them having to bat an eye and get paid what you're actually worth. And what about, imagine if you never had to feel that you had too much on your plate and that you didn't have enough revenue to hire another person. If you've tried other programs, maybe you've even talked to myself or my team in the past, and you're tired of waiting it out and you still aren't getting those right clients, then I invite you to schedule a call with me and my team for our 8-week sales mastery training to go into more depth. You can do that by going to theabundantcall.com. Once again, that's theabundantcall.com. There's a video there. You'll see that Ross recently tripled his rates and his reoccurring revenue is up $4,000 per month. Marion and Jody actually did $25,000 in additional fees and revenue just this past December, when typically they don't really have any revenue. So once again, head on over to theabundantcall.com to book your complimentary call if your business has been around for at least 2 years, or you do over $100,000 in revenue in your firm. I look forward to connecting with some of you there. Now let's welcome Paul to the show. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Michelle. It's always a pleasure to be speaking to a brilliant mind like yours. And of course, addressing your audience is always an honor.
Well, thank you. Myself and all of the accountants listening are very excited for today's discussion because it is extremely chaotic. A lot of accountants are not only dealing with regular tax stuff, but PPP, EIDL, clients coming to them with 8 million questions, forgiveness, new tax laws, 2021 top issues. So today we're going to talk about how to maintain realistic motivation and informed enthusiasm in the face of chaos. So make sure you have your yellow notepad, your legal pad that's sitting in the stack of papers right next to you, and a pen or a pencil. And let's welcome Paul to the show. And Paul, before we start, can you give everyone a little bit of your background?
Sure. Well, I am a speaker and author of an amazing book called Subtle Words That Sell. I am, interestingly enough, a master hypnotist. I put thousands of people in trance, and more importantly, I've helped thousands of people awaken from their trances of impossibility and can't do and despair and envy, and taught them to create their own states of mind that serve them better. I am a master practitioner and trainer of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. If you follow Tony Robbins, then you have a good idea of what that is. And I'm also a pretty darn good healer. using NLP and hypnosis, like to cure phobias like stage fright and fear of public speaking and social anxiety.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of experience. And today we're going to just talk about one specific thing. If they're interested in your book, Subtle Words That Sell, where can they find that?
Well, they can grab it on Amazon. As a matter of fact, though, I have an entire rapid sales acceleration training that they can get for free. Go to paulrossbook.com. It's got a 23-minute audio training, the first 4 chapters of my book, and a special report on crushing objections. So just go to paulrossbook.com and you can get that for free.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you for sharing that. So let's dive into today because it is very chaotic. For those of you that don't know, I work with accountants. Yeah, you've been listening to this for a couple of years now. And I always hear about chaos. I hear a lot of things like, let me actually read to you a few things I hear. Okay. I have no time to work on my business while still working in my business. Okay, that's one of them. I also hear this. I'm the owner, the CPA. I have 3 employees. I have too much on my plate and not enough revenue to hire another person at the moment. So they're in that chicken and the egg situation, equaling chaos, right? I also hear, I've got one more for you because this one's really good. I'm the person in charge and I don't have any clue what's going on in my sales process.
Oh, wow.
And then the final one I want to share with you is one I actually got today. This one is a really good one. So let me share this one with you because this is one that, when I hear of chaos, I'm like, yep, that sounds pretty chaotic to me. Michelle, the whole sales process is so overwhelming. We've learned so much. We've done upwards of 30,000 in revenue, but I feel like I need to hire a salesperson to take all this over, because they're in such chaos. And they're a 2-firm owner, husband and wife own the firm. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So for all of those examples, Paul, what do you think is the first thing an accountant should do who owns the firm, who finds themselves in chaos? I think about a tornado, and you're in the middle of the tornado and it's spinning around. Or if you're down in South Florida, you're probably thinking, well, Michelle, I have hurricanes down here. So you're in the middle of the hurricane spinning around and you have no idea how you're going to land on the other side.
It's very, well, that you use that metaphor of weather, because a mentor of mine once said, look, when you run your own business, if you're an entrepreneur running your own business, you're either sailing into a storm, in a storm, or sailing out of the storm, which I think is really true. So
that is true.
It's very true. So let's make a distinction about overwhelm and chaos. Overwhelm and chaos are very closely related. One is virtually overlapping the other, but I think we need to step back and have a look at some of the false expectations about the sales process, and then the false expectations about motivation and what it means to have an informed motivation and an intelligent enthusiasm, if that's okay.
Yeah. So are we going to define overwhelm and chaos so we get to the bottom of that and
sure.
what the difference is? Okay.
Sure. Yes, sure. So overwhelm means you simply have too much on your plate to do. Chaos means that you do the right thing and the predicted result still doesn't happen because of factors that you can't foresee and that are outside of your control. Mm-hmm. So let me unpack chaos, and I'll keep it simple, non-technical, because I know when we have multiple discussions, you tend to pull me back from my technical nerd boy wanting to dive into jargon edge, and I appreciate that about you.
It needs to be in Michelle Speak. So talk to me like I'm in 4th grade so we all get this.
Oh, Michelle, you are one of the most brilliant. You're one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever had the privilege of calling friend. So let's have none of that. So let me give you a metaphor. I think too many people who are in the world of sales, whatever, and you're always selling. I don't care what you think you're doing, you've got to sell. Or even if you have employees who are selling for you, you've got to sell them on the notion that they can do the goals that you set for them. In any case, too many people have what I call the vending machine theory of selling. You put in your 50 cents of consistency. You put in your 50 cents of asking the qualifying questions. You put in your 50 cents of doing your close. You push the button and out comes the candy bar or the sale. Well, the problem with that model is it's too linear. Oftentimes there are factors way beyond our control that we can't foresee or predict. For example, maybe the person you're selling to just got into a fight with their spouse the next day. They get into a fight and the spouse says, blah, 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 blah. You never share anything with me. And then they're so emotional, you can't overcome that. Maybe they get hit with a huge tax bill. And ironically, they can't afford your services, or so they think. Bottom line is, in selling, there are going to be factors outside of your control. That's first and foremost. And if you fail to recognize that, then you're going to consistently be disappointed because you're going to think, well, I could have made that work. I could have made that work. When in fact, sometimes you just can't. It's just the way it works. Now, if you study under a great mentor like you and you learn your processes, it'll work more often than not. But you have to accept that sometimes the process is chaotic, and there'll be times when you don't even understand why that deal didn't close. And so instead of beating yourself up and constantly asking questions that can't be answered, you have to learn when to just let go. Mm-hmm. So the antidote to chaos is, number one, recognizing that it's an inherent part of what you're doing. It doesn't mean you're failing. And second, having the ability to say, I don't need to control every outcome. I don't need to have things always go my way. There's a difference between control and influence. We can never fully control what happens, but we can sure as heck have a strong influence. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. So do you have a real example for us that you can share that you experience chaos, right? You learn to let it go. You recognize the inherent output of that. And you were able to say, okay, this is an area I don't have control over. So we can have a tangible example.
Yes. So I like to say I'm the most expensive coach and trainer you can't wait to hire, because it's true. You have to open a pretty big checkbook to work with me. I had a client who was ready to sign on for $50,000 for 6 months of coaching with me. A nice paycheck. I could have used that paycheck to pay off some debt and some tax debt, et cetera, et cetera. And he was ready to go. He actually gave me the first third of what I require. And then the next day, I almost used a profanity. I kid you not, his wife served him with divorce papers.
Oh, no.
And, yep. And his world just crumbled. And he said, look, he called me. He said, I just can't do any training with you at all. My world has been turned upside down. I'm going to have legal fees. I don't know what she's going to get from me. Mm-hmm. Can you refund my first payment? And my policy is absolutely give people, if I can't help people, then I don't want to. If I can't help people, then I don't want their money. Conversely, when I help people, I deserve what I'm paid. So that just, I'm so upset. I was already counting what that 50 grand could do. And it took me a while. I had to sit and meditate with it, experience all my feelings of frustration and confusion. And then, you know what I did? This is going to sound hokey. Right. I brought him up in my mind and I said, thank you for showing up as my teacher and my guide. I bless you and send you on your way. Mm-hmm. I actually took the person who sent chaos into my life, thanked him for showing up as my teacher, and blessed him and sent him on his way. Now that sounds so woo-woo and new age and mystical schmystical, but I'm telling you, it allowed me to recover from it. Instead of moping in it and dwelling in it for, 10 days, a week to 10 days, I got over it in a matter of an hour and a half. So just imagine when you face a deep disappointment, if you can get over it in about 90 minutes to 2 hours.
Well, and I think that's the part of letting it go, right? So you walked actually through a little process, and I mean, that sounds really easy, but in reality, I don't think it's really that easy. I actually recently had a student that dealt with something similar. It was a $40,000 engagement. He he actually performed all the services and the client wanted the refund and he did it. And, we had a goodbye party for that client and in our group. This was just on Monday, actually. And we wiped our hands clean and we said, okay, what did we learn from that? And I know that you talk about learning from your past, but sometimes there really wasn't anything in this case. It was just like a bad apple. And I think that's what that is a bad apple, where when you don't have control of the outcome at times, that's just that random like baseball that came out of left field if you're sitting in the baseball, stands.
Well, there's something else embedded in your story.
Okay.
Which is they had the advantage of having you as a trainer and also having a mastermind of people who could support, which is why so many people are listening to this. They really need to get that having a mentor like Michelle and having a mastermind and a group of people who can share your situation is so valuable. I belong to multiple numbers of them. I have invested $350K to $500K during my lifetime in training and coaching and masterminds. That's why I think any accountant or CPA or tax preparer, any of that's listening to this broadcast, it would serve them well to really inquire about having you train them and join your program. Because I just think having an expert and a group of people to hold you up is so important.
Okay. Well, you all can find something, or if you don't have a support group or mastermind, there's a lot of accounting Facebook groups. Jackie has one, Accounting Influencers, and I know that even those Facebook groups can be really supportive. So, Paul, what is the second thing that you think is probably the most important thing we need to do in a time of chaos, right? If you're thinking about how do we have motivation, realistic motivation. So I know that's what we're talking about. And informed enthusiasm, right? In chaos, because sometimes chaos, when I'm thinking about the weather analogy that you said, right? We're either sailing into the storm, we're in the storm, or we're sailing out of the storm. I think that's what I heard. And, when we're thinking about sailing out of the storm, we want to go plop on the couch with the Netflix and a beverage of choice and probably a not so healthy snack to eat our emotions away in dealing with chaos, but it could feel like overwhelm. So you don't even know what you're dealing with, possibly.
Correct. So how do we, in the face of all this, maintain an informed enthusiasm and a realistic motivation? And this has to do with what I call, you've heard of the phrase a vision quest?
I have not.
You've never heard of a vision quest?
No.
This is indigenous peoples do this, where they go out into the desert and they go out and they have some kind of painful ritual. Maybe this is very extreme. They're tied to a tree for 7 days without food and water, and they're seeking for a vision. We all are told, let's find our vision for our business, for our lives, write it out, do a vision board. I think you first have to have a values quest. You have to know the real values that are driving you in your business. If you say, well, I want to make $500,000 and so I can have financial freedom, you really need to ask, well, what would that bring for you? What is the underlying values that drive your vision of success? Because once you get clear on your values, then that becomes the anchor to keep you motivated, to keep you enthusiastic, to say, okay, these are the lessons that I've learned. And I know that because I take a stand for these values, whatever they are for you, that supports my vision, and my vision pulls me ahead. So to have a vision that pulls you ahead, you have to have a foundation of values. Know exactly your why. Why are you doing this?
So what are yours? We've talked about values and your why and all that, but I think like real life, your real life examples and stories are the best ways to learn. So let's hear it, Paul. What's your value quest?
Well, my whys come down to something my mother taught me. One of my greatest teachers in my life was my mother. And whenever we would when I would have questions, my mother would point to the set of encyclopedias. I come from a Jewish family, and for Jewish families, oftentimes books are sacred. And she pointed to the encyclopedias and she would say, look it up. And if I couldn't find the answer, she'd take me to the library. If the library wasn't there, didn't have the answers, she would say, Paul, you be the one to go make the answer. And so one of my values is to find answers where other people just give up, and to take those answers and through my creativity, create answers for people so that they can move forward with their life, to take ideas that people have never really considered and offer it to people in a way where they change their lives. So for me, it's using my creativity to be the best possible teacher that anyone could ever encounter. This is what I hear time and again from my students, that I'm the best teacher they've ever encountered.
A lot of the accountants, though, we go through this process in the 8-week sales mastery training. And a lot of the whys are, I'm really good at what I do. I want to help business owners have the life of their dreams, right? They're not this of depth. And what I'm hearing from you, like, how could you help everyone listening? Because I know the accountants, when I ask you your why, you're like, I love what I do. I'm really good with numbers. I want to help businesses be profitable and not go under. And it's like, no, that's not really the real why. Because when you ask why, that's not going to drive you forward. What's some things that they can do to get below the surface, like for you, where your why is that you, as a kid, got to make the answers, and now you create answers so people can move forward in their life? Like, that's pretty powerful.
I had a great mom who was a great teacher. I'm going to give you a mic drop. I normally only do this to people who are like VIP clients who are paying me at least 5 figures, but you know that I admire you so much and your genius that I'm going to give it to you, and as a service to your clientele. I mean it. If you're listening to this, Michelle's going to get mad at me. Michelle is a super genius and the best salesperson I've ever met. And here it is. When I do change work with people and they're kind of stuck, I say, let's do what I call the miracle question. And it's this: if you woke up tomorrow and you'd achieved all your goals and everything you've always wanted and all your negative patterns were gone, how would you know? So that requires them to envision it. And then I ask the real question: why would it be important to you? And then I ask, why would it be important to the people you love? And then why would it be important to the world at large? Now that is a deep level question. In hypnosis, I'm going to use one technical, can I use one technical term, please? And I promise I won't use any more. In hypnosis, this is called a transderivational search. It simply means that the unconscious mind will activate on all levels and seek out every possible meaning to the answer to that question. That question. So what's the difference between saying, what would you like to achieve as your goal, and saying, if you woke up tomorrow and all of your goals, all your desires have been achieved, how would you know? And why would that be important to you? Why would it be important and matter to the people you love? And why would it be important and matter to the world around you? One question is just a factual one. The other one creates a deep search in the unconscious mind. And as a hypnotist, I also know it taps into the power of your unconscious. Now, the power of the unconscious cannot be underestimated. So that one question, if you woke up tomorrow, or write it down, journal it. If I woke up tomorrow and I'd achieved all my dreams, all my desires, all my goals, what would that look like? And why would it be important to me? Why would it be important to the people I love? And why would it be important to the world at large? Because here's the real key. I think humans were, one of the things that stands in the way of your accountants, if I can be so bold, is they don't believe they deserve to be paid what they're worth.
Yeah, I think every single person listening will say true. And if you think that's true, I want you to write a review about how great this podcast is, The Abundant Accountant, and you can write, yes, that statement was true that Paul said. We don't deserve that we should be paid our worth. And I think that's very true. It's very true for every accountant I've ever talked to.
Here's another value bomb mic drop. I want everyone listening, in your little notebooks, write out the word deserve, DESERVE, and then cross out the DE. And what word do you get?
Serve.
So what you deserve is equal to or greater to the degree to which you serve. So I want you to think about that again. What you deserve is equal or greater to the extent or the value you bring when you serve. So when we ask ourselves that third question, why would it matter to the world at large? That requires us to really think how we would be of service. And the minute your unconscious mind gets how much you are of service to others, it makes that equation and says, oh, I do deserve it. That will immediately wipe out that whole thing that you don't deserve to be paid what you're worth. I know that's one of the pain points. You don't believe you deserve to be paid what you're worth. You're giving out information for free. You're taking on clients who are price shoppers. Once you really get this deservingness down, that stuff is going to disappear. And also follow what Michelle tells you to do.
Yeah, well, this is, the crux of it. And I think I'm going to bring this to the next class too, because this is what I talk about for one whole class is this, and if you don't understand truly the problems that you really help solve for your clients, then, if you think you're just solving how to manage their paperwork and expenses, that's really not the root cause. But we're not going to talk about that today. We're talking about you. We're talking about, chaos. Yeah, no, it's okay. We're talking about maintaining realistic motivation, which we just talked about, and informed enthusiasm. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that in the face of chaos, because the world is chaotic, and this is probably the most chaos in the accounting industry. I think that I've seen, since I worked at Moss Adams back in 2000. I mean, with the laws changing and everything I shared about earlier in the podcast, that's a lot to tackle. That's a lot of, those are like baseballs coming at you from every direction. It's like, where do you even begin? And I always hear from my students, like you were sharing earlier, what's the difference between overwhelm and chaos, even though it seems like the two cross paths so closely. So what do we do about having informed enthusiasm?
Well, let's look at the first word there. Let's parse it. Informed. This is the key. What does it mean to be informed? Informed specifically about what, as we would say in NLP? Informed about what and how? Well, I think we need to be informed first and foremost that enthusiasm is not something that's going to be at the same level all the time. The idea that you're always going to be super enthusiastic all the time is not realistic. It's just not. We've been sold a shoddy bill of goods about motivation and about enthusiasm. The idea that we have to be super pumped up all the time, that we can never get down, that we have to be, I don't want to offend anybody so I'm going to tread lightly. We have to be a fan of some of these super coaches who have huge followings and fill up arenas. We're always saying, yes, yes, yes. The problem with being in these pumped up peak states is they're exhausting. And also, Michelle, if your client is not in that state, you're going to fry their circuits. Instead, we have to be informed, and that means accept the fact that your enthusiasm is simply going to wax and wane. It's not a fixed quantity of stuff like porridge that they dole out in an orphanage. Instead, it's a neurological response that arises in your body and in your brain. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get smaller. At times, it's going to flood through. At other times, it's going to be subtle. So the real linguistic trick, this is sort of a semantic distinction, is simply be aware, be informed that your enthusiasm is not going to stay at the same level. And you don't even have to be particularly enthusiastic to do a task well. You just have to be thorough and to have a little bit of perspective and a sense of humor about it. Mm-hmm. One of my greatest mentors, I would say he's the third best mentor of my life, said, you can be thorough without having to be serious and invested. So what you really need to do, I think, is to take on a process-oriented frame, and I'll unpack that. In a breakfast of bacon and eggs, one animal is invested and the other one is interested. So we have to be interested in our results, but invested in our process. That's how you maintain your enthusiasm, that you have a process orientation rather than outcome. You want to be interested in the outcome, of course, and that you realize that enthusiasm is not some fixed quality of something like porridge they give you in a bowl. and you don't get any more once you've consumed it. It is a process that you do inside your brain, inside your body. So it's going to get bigger, it's going to get smaller, and don't expect it to be there all the time. You're going to have disappointment, you're going to have confusion. That's okay. As long as your enthusiasm can come back on some level, then you don't have to believe that it always has to be there and be at a high level. Mm-hmm. You can function perfectly well just staying neutral and doing what you need to do.
Okay, so I have a question, because a client of mine who just finished up my class said she was actually paralyzed by fear. Her business and firm was like a sinking ship, but now she has the confidence and the ability to dream again. Like she has a dose of enthusiasm again. And she said she actually feels re-energized to where she was when she first started her business. How do you create that kind of change on your own? I helped her, but some people need some tools.
I would say you can do it on your own, but in order to do it, you need to learn a process of self-hypnosis, which I teach. I'm not trying to plug myself. I'm being serious. You can go find out courses on self-hypnosis anywhere for cheap. You can go on Udemy and do it. And you also have to learn to meditate. I know I've mentioned meditation before, probably to the point where you're sick of hearing it. But a simple a simple 10-minute, non-religious, non-spiritual, just a simple mindfulness meditation. That's all the rage these days. I've been doing mindfulness since 2006 when my mother was dying of cancer. I just couldn't survive, and that practice saved my life. It saved me from jumping in front of a train, metaphorically, maybe even literally. So having a meditation and a self-hypnosis practice.
Well, and I'm sure that YouTube has something, on the meditation side, and there's really good apps like Calm and all the other apps. So thank you so much, Paul, for sharing that. Is there anything else that would help an accountant who's dealing with chaos right now that we haven't touched on yet today?
Learn from someone who's been there. Take on a mentor or a guide who's gotten the results that you want to get, and walk the path of someone whose footsteps are already there. And so once again, I encourage all of you who are not a member of Michelle's program or training, take her on. Take her on. She's taught me things, and I haven't even paid her, so she's super awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Paul, for the plug. We weren't trying to plug that anybody, but I do teach sales. So, when you work with me, you're going to learn how to plug yourself or have other people do it for you so gracefully. So that's the how we do that here at the Abundant Accountant, in a way where you're not feeling like a nag, you're not being bothersome, you're not doing it being too pushy and sleazy and all that other nonsense. We're just being very, upfront and honest. So with that being said, thank you again, Paul, for being here. One more time, how can they find your book on Amazon?
Well, even better, if you want my Rapid Sales Accelerator course, just go to paulrossbook.com. You'll get the first 4 chapters of my book, which are all about mindset. So go to paulrossbook.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again for being here with us on The Abundant Accountant.
My joy.
It was an honor to have you.
My joy, my pleasure, my honor, my friend.
Thank you so much for joining Paul and I today on the Abundant Accountant podcast. It's always an honor to be here. And remember to think about your true why. This is one of the areas I see as the biggest challenge for accountants to really figure out. Really, truly figuring out, why do you do the work you do? So remember to ask those questions to yourself. If you didn't write them down, I recommend rewinding this. But remember, his why is creating the answers so people can move forward in their life. And he figured that out by, when he was a kid, his mom would say, well, you get to figure out the answers. Or if you've listened to a previous episode with him, or the one after it, I can't remember right now, he talks about when he was a kid, he would play with robots and try to break them, and then realize that when you twist the wires together and try to turn it on again, it starts to steam and break up and just, blow up. So for me, I'm here because my why is to truly end the grind where you constantly are frustrated and stressed out, having no control of who you're working with, like getting getting the reins on who you want to work with and who you don't. Like, how can you gain confidence to let go of those pain in the ass clients? I hear this from so many of you. Or, really about getting the ARs under control. If you have accounts receivable and you're an accountant, no mas. You should not have ARs. I worked with a woman, Amani. She collected 40,000 of 80,000 of long-term outstanding AR in just 8 weeks. So that's my commitment to you and my why, because I see on the other side, like I was sharing earlier in the episode with Diana, I mean, she was paralyzed by fear, and now she is re-energized and she's able to dream again. And when I started The Abundant Accountant, that I was also re-energized. I mean, I was in the slumps before. So when you can dream and be re-energized, life is a lot more fun. So with that being said, if you want to explore what it would be like working with myself in our 8-week sales mastery training, and you've tried other programs, nothing's really worked, and you're really tired of just saying, oh, now's not a good time, or I'm tired of trying things out and I'm sick of reinventing the wheel, and you want just help and you're ready to commit, then head on over to theabundantcall.com. As long as you've had your business at least 2 years or you're doing over 100,000 in revenue. So once again, head on over to theabundantcall.com, and I look forward to talking to some of you, and I'll see you in the next episode.